This chapter is a background introduction, you can skip it if you don't like it. Earth, NASA, Planetary Observation Program Group. Hi, Jack, I have a picture here, would you like to see it? Please, Tom, don't waste my time. Jack said without looking up. I think you'd better come and have a look. Tom insisted. Jack raised his head suspiciously. What did you find? A new exoplanet. No, this is a photo of the edge of the solar system. There's a fuzzy little spot here. Tom said, pointing to the photo on the computer screen. The photo is just a black background and a lot of small light spots with no rules. Except for professional astronomers, anyone who sees this photo can't connect it with the starry sky. Jack carefully identified it, and then determined that it was not Tom's misjudgment. What do you think it is? The 10th largest planet in the solar system. When Pluto was first discovered, it was just an inconspicuous pixel in a photo. Tom shrugged, I don't know, its position is in the ecliptic plane, but its speed is unbelievable. Then he put on another photo, the blurred point has moved half a centimeter away. Jack was shocked. Tom, have you confirmed the shooting interval of the two photos? It's been confirmed, 7 days apart, in the same direction. It's impossible. Jack stood up abruptly. If it flew so fast, it would have already surpassed the third universe. How could it keep revolving? I'm surprised too. Tom nodded in agreement. Jack, should we follow it for a while? At least determine what it is. Keep an eye on it, don't let it escape your sight. Jack said solemnly, also, don't let the SETI people know about it for now. Tom laughed, come on Jack, are you going to find aliens before SETI? Jack said angrily, shut your mouth, Tom. Okay, I'll listen to you. Tom raised his hand in surrender. From this day on, the two began to secretly monitor this shadow with an extremely abnormal speed, but there was still no sufficient evidence to prove its identity. 2 months later, the shadow was blocked by Jupiter and never appeared again. Half-year later. Just give up. Tom was extremely unwilling, feeling that he had just missed the Nobel Prize. Jack, can't you think of a way? Jack took a deep breath. Voyager 1 and 2 are in other directions. Keep monitoring, maybe it will come out by itself tomorrow. But this wait is 20 years. 20 years later, China. On a summer night, the stars are shining brightly. Ye Fengchen said mysteriously, son, today is your birthday. Dad gave you a gift. The child jumped up and down with joy, and acted like a spoiled child around his father. Dad, Daddy, where is my gift? Where is it? Where is it? The child regarded his father as a big tree and tried his best to climb up. Ye Fengchen laughed loudly, struggling to pick up the half-height child, holding it high above his head. The laughter of the father and son spread far and wide. Ye's wife showed a knowing smile. Old yet, how can you still look like a child when you are so old? Didn't the child like it? Ye Fengchen smiled and put down the child. The child who fell to the ground was reluctant to forgive. Dad, Daddy, where is my gift? It's here. Ye Fengchen led the child to the balcony and pulled off the fleece covering the shelf. The child screamed in surprise, telescope? Thank you, Dad. The child was ecstatically fiddling with the brand new astronomical telescope, but still couldn't get the point, so he had to ask for help pitifully. Dad, teach me. The father, who had been prepared for a long time, laughed confidently. Look at Dad. The young mother smiled and gave her husband a blank look. Virtue. Ye Fengchen took a moment to adjust the focal length, and quickly showed his eyepiece. Look, this is Jupiter. The child rushed over and immediately saw a red planet full of stripes, surrounded by several inconspicuous satellites, and a faint halo around his waist. The child suddenly shouted in panic, Dad, why did Jupiter go? Ye Fengchen fondly patted the child's head. Didn't Dad tell you, the planets revolve around the Sun, and Jupiter keeps moving. After a while, it will run out of your camera. Oh! The child suddenly realized. His eyes moved closer to the lens again, and his curious eyes searched around Jupiter, and he found a few very conspicuous large satellites. Suddenly, another large moon appeared behind Jupiter, and the child's eyes lit up. Dad, I have found the moons, 5. What? Ye Fengchen was shocked. Impossible, let me see. He leaned into the eyepiece and counted, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, no less than 5, and one of them only showed a small edge, but basically it could be judged that it was indeed a large satellite. Ye Fengchen was stunned. How is this possible? The gift bought for the child is just an entry-level small astronomical telescope with limited magnification. It is the limit to see 4 Galileo satellites clearly. It is impossible to see other satellites of Jupiter. Not to mention the extra 5th satellite, which is no smaller than the other satellites. Dad, what's wrong with you? The child asked curiously. Ye Fengchen hurriedly covered up. No, it's nothing, wait for me, son. After that, he ran into the house, took out his mobile phone as fast as he could, pointed the camera at the eyepiece on the telescope, and took a few pictures. However, the phase effect of his mobile phone is extremely poor, and the effect is even worse at night when the light is insufficient. The photos taken cannot even see Jupiter, let alone the moons of Jupiter that are dimmer than Jupiter. Ye Fengchen leaned over to the eyepiece to take a closer look again, but found that the extra satellite was gone again. His spirit was in a trance for a while, and he couldn't help asking himself silently, am I wrong? But what about the child, did the child see it too? Ye Fengchen couldn't help falling into deep confusion. 47 minutes ago, note, 1, Jupiter. Behind the huge red planet, a celestial body covered with ice and snow slowly cut into Jupiter's orbit, and the celestial body gradually approached Jupiter, just close to Jupiter 49. Io 49, which is equivalent to the size of an aircraft carrier, has no resistance. It was caught by the gravitational force of this celestial body and fell directly to the surface of the mysterious celestial body. It is still more than 100 kilometers away from the surface. Become a group of violently burning meteors. A dim light suddenly appeared on the surface of the celestial body. The light hit the meteor without error, and the meteor immediately burst into dozens of pieces of different sizes. Moments later, the fragment hit the ground, causing a series of violent explosions that shot into the sky and illuminated Jupiter's back. In the depths of the mysterious celestial body, 2 upright creatures with a height of more than 3 meters stood side by side, staring at the violent explosion on the surface of the celestial body until the light dissipated. One of them made a sound like wood chips rubbing. Your Majesty, the starship has arrived at the predetermined position. Note 2, very good. Said the upright creature called His Majesty, has the research come to a conclusion? My Prime Minister. There is a result. The Prime Minister replied, according to the observations, our armed forces are not sure of defeating the Blue Star Lord. Isn't the space technology of the Blue Stars very primitive? Are we so weak that even a civilization that has not yet entered the space age can't defeat it? Blue Star people's spaceflight capabilities are not strong, but their weapons are very advanced. Our observations have found that they have mastered the laws of stars and can use the power of stars to a limited extent. This is our biological civilization forever. Unattainable heights, given enough time, the Blue Stars may become one of the most terrifying races in the universe. Then what should we do? The starship has been unable to fly into interstellar space again. If we can't occupy the Blue Star, our race will be destroyed. Your Majesty, we have deciphered the living matter obtained from the edge of the galaxy. Those living matter are of the same origin as the Blue Star people, and this will become the key to occupying the Blue Star. How do you want to do it? Biotechnology is our disadvantage, but it is also our advantage. Although we can't get samples of Blue Star creatures, we can deduce the life forms of Blue Star creatures with the help of those living substances, and develop products that are only effective for blue star creatures. Gene virus, destroying the most powerful ruling population of blue star with a virus. Let go and do it. His Majesty said. A few days later, the International Astronomical Union announced that Jupiter captured a stray dwarf planet with a diameter of more than 5,400 kilometers and a mass equivalent to 86% of Earth's. This star pushed Ganymede off the altar in one fell swoop, becoming the largest satellite of Jupiter, and also the largest satellite in the Solar System. No one. A few months later, a group of inconspicuous asteroids escaped Jupiter's gravitational pull and slowly flew towards Earth. 9 years later, a massive meteor shower descended on Earth. P.S. This is a pit. Only book friends who persist to the end will have the opportunity to dig out the things buried in the pit. UU Reading welcomes all book lovers to come and read. The latest, fastest, and most popular serial works are all available in UU Reading. Mobile users, please read. Please be patient after reading 2 chapters before deciding whether to continue. 2 years later, Jingshui Lake Tourist Area. As the sun passed, the lakeside in midsummer was full of tourists, and dozens of cruise ships of different sizes were lined up on the pier. 50 yuan per person on the island in the heart of the lake. Let's set off right away. The young boat owner shouted vigorously, but he didn't get a single passenger. The boat owner wiped the sweat from his forehead in disappointment and sighed helplessly. People are poor and short-sighted, and the ship is in a bad position. Can people still earn food? Young man, what's the price for chartering a boat? An old but breathy voice suddenly asked. The owner of the boat was instantly revived with blood, gritted his teeth and said cruelly, 300 an hour. Looking up, 7 or 8 people had gathered under the boat, and the leader was an old man wearing a bonny hat. The short-haired girl behind the old man immediately pulled the old man's cuff. The cooked duck was about to fly, and the owner looked embarrassed. Old man, 400 is the normal price, and 300 per hour is really a conscience price, and I can't even earn the money back for gas. The old man smiled and patted the girl's hand and said, just this one, nothing else is suitable. The owner of the boat was overjoyed. Please get on the boat, big sister, I'll help you with your luggage. After that, he jumped off the boat. The girl's eyes hidden under her sunglasses glared at the boat owner. Who is your eldest girl? The owner of the boat was very embarrassed, so he was anxious to help the old man. I'll help you. The old man smiled and nodded. Young man is not bad. What's your surname? The owner of the ship hurriedly smiled and said, you always praise me. My name is Yehan, Han Yang, your noble surname. Don't give your surname Qin. Old Qin was still smiling. Old Qin, be careful. Yehan helped Mr. Qin into the open cabin, and the others followed closely, all looking for places to sit down. The girl wrinkled her nose in disgust, and said vaguely with a lollipop, Grandpa, this boat is too broken. Old Qin waved his hand and said, we're not here to play. The girl pursed her lips, took out a tissue and wiped the seat 3 times in a row, before sitting on it carefully. It's not that she is hypocritical, but it's really too dirty. Yehan got into the cockpit and started the engine. The dilapidated cruise ship slowly left the pier, separated the waves and sailed to the lake. Old Qin walked slowly outside the cab. Young man, your boat was rebuilt from a fishing boat, right? Your old eyes are like torches. Yehan smiled embarrassedly. I don't know why in the past few years, the fish in the lake is getting less and less every year, and I can't even eat when I go fishing. I just bought a boat to eat. Why are there no fish in the lake? Old Qin asked curiously. I don't know. Yehan immediately shook his head. In the past few years, no matter how many fry are put in, there will be no fish in the lake. Any research and analysis is useless. You didn't find any fish? Not one. Old Qin frowned. That's not true. It's pitifully small. The biggest one is only half a palm long, and it's not enough to stick between the teeth. While talking, the boat was hundreds of meters away from the shore, and Mr. Chin suddenly said, "Little yet, stop here for a while." "Here?" Yehan couldn't help but startled. "Why do you stop for 4 or 6 unreliable people? It's a lot of money to stop and go." Qin Lao laughed, "I'm also here to investigate." Yehan was immediately awe-inspiring, but still suggested, "Professor Qin, I advise you not to waste your energy. Over the past few years, there have been many investigations. What comes out?" Professor Qin smiled disapprovingly, "To do research, you must do it when you know you can't do it." "Professor, the equipment is ready!" shouted a student with glasses in the cabin. Professor Qin rushed to Yehan and walked into the cabin with a smile. Several students immediately got busy under Professor Qin's command. Some were debugging equipment, some ran to the side of the boat to take water samples from glass bottles, and one held an arm about the thickness of the thing with the propeller on the tail, ran to the stern, tied to the rope and threw it directly into the water. A few minutes later, the fishing tour started again at the request of Professor Qin, and stopped and went for more than an hour, with the island in the center of the lake in sight. Being too close to the island in the center of the lake did not meet Professor Qin's requirements, so Yehan decided to circle around the island in the center of the lake a few times. The fishing tour bypassed a small island, and a medium-sized yacht with 417 painted on the sides suddenly appeared in front of the fishing tour, and was slowly drifting with the waves on the lake. Yehan couldn't help but be stunned. This place is no more than 1 kilometer away from the main channel, and the famous reefs nearby are densely covered. If you are not careful, the reefs will be sunk and sunk. That's why his wrecked boat with a shallow draft dares to go here. 417. Did you take the wrong medicine? At this time, the atmosphere in the cabin was very solemn, and Professor Qin was very worried. Have you found it yet? No. The student holding the tablet shook his head. The microsubmarine has not photographed a single fish until now. What about the water quality? How is the water quality? 3 types of water quality, all water samples are of 3 types. Another student replied. Professor Qin sighed in disappointment. He Yang, take the submarine back. He Yang agreed, and buckled the tablet upside down on the chair. The moment the tablet was buckled, a huge shadow suddenly flashed across the computer screen. He Yang went to the stern and grabbed the leash, but the leash was unexpectedly heavy, and it was too painful to pull on the palm of his hand. It must have been the sailing that caused the water resistance to be too strong, so he immediately signaled Yehan to stop the boat. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. The customer is God. Yehan turned off the engine, and the cruise ship stopped slowly, only 70 to 80 meters away from the 417 boat. Yehan looked around suspiciously. Why didn't he see half of him on 417? Where have everyone gone? He Yang pulled the leash again. The leash was still heavy, but it was finally able to move. Yehan suddenly found that there seemed to be a person floating on the water in front of him. Someone fell into the water? He quickly pulled out the pocket telescope under the bridge, but when he raised the telescope, he couldn't find that person again. Could it be my eyesight? At this moment, an exclamation suddenly came from the stern. The elongated exclamation was suddenly drowned out by the popping sound, and everyone in the cabin stood up one after another. But where is there any figure at the stern? Yehan jumped out of the cockpit with a single stride, strode towards the stern, and neatly took off the truck inner tube hanging overboard on the way. However, when he rushed to the stern, there was no movement in the water, only a circle of ripples spread out. Yehan couldn't help being stunned for a moment, then turned around and asked urgently, "Can he know water? Can he know water?" The man with glasses said unsurely, "He's from the south. The implication is that he should know water." Yehan stomped his feet fiercely. It is true that there is plenty of water in the south, but who stipulated that people in the south must know water? He quickly pulled the rope wrapped around the life tube into his hand, twisted and was about to jump into the water. To be honest, he really doesn't want to go into the water. It's not that he can't save him when he sees death, but that people who don't know how to water will instinctively grab whatever they can catch when they fall into the water, and the rescuer will be hugged by the drowning person if he is not careful. If you are strong, you might not be able to save people, but you will risk your own life. UU Reading welcomes all book lovers to come and read. The latest, fastest, and most popular serial works are all available in UU Reading. Mobile users, please read. A professional lifeguard would only approach the drowning person from the rear, but he couldn't see where the person was and couldn't judge which direction was the correct rescue direction. It's just that human life is at stake, and conscience makes Yehan unable to sit back and ignore it. Moreover, when something happens to his boat, he, the owner of the boat, has an inescapable responsibility. Yehan's legs straddled the stern railing, when the water surface clattered, and a figure suddenly jumped out of the water. Yehan immediately retracted his legs, swung his arms into a big windmill, and slammed the life-saving tire beside He Yang. Grab it! He Yang in the water was terrified, and his fingers scratched the rusted side of the boat. Pull me up! Pull me up! Ah! The shout suddenly turned into a tragic cry, and He Yang, who was floating on the water, suddenly sank. Yehan didn't have time to think about it, and jumped forward suddenly, his belly against the railing, and grabbed He Yang's arm. He Yang seemed to be holding on to a life-saving straw, and his two hands were like a pair of pliers, tightly holding Yehan's chest out, so that Yehan grinned for a while. Yehan tried his best to pull He Yang out, but He Yang was extremely heavy. Yehan tried his best to suckle, but He Yang not only didn't come up, but instead sank a bit into the water. Come and help! Yehan let out a sullen roar, and the students in the ship woke up like a dream and rushed to the stern. Everyone finally worked together to drag He Yang out of the water, and just as his head emerged from the water, He Yang let out a shrill scream. Yehan was stunned to see a cloud of dark red scattered under the water. At the same time, He Yang in the water suddenly lightened and was pulled back to the boat by everyone in one breath. Yehan exerted too much force, unbalanced and fell on the deck, her nearly breaking into 8 petals. He Yang fell heavily, lying on the deck motionless. Yehan suddenly smelled a strong smell, and when he looked up, he was shocked. He Yang's right leg was cut off at the knee, and the calf was missing, an irregular wound with deep visible bone extended from the left hip to the knee socket. People want to vomit. Yehan jumped up cleverly, kneeling beside He Yang with blood all over the floor, and quickly unfastened his belt to tightly tie He Yang's broken leg. Ambulance! Call an ambulance! The man with glasses shouted loudly. The blood flow stopped at the broken leg. Yehan turned his head and saw He Yang's dilated pupils. Yehan turned pale in shock and hugged He Yang's head, letting the sun shine on He Yang's eyes, but his dilated pupils did not respond. Looking at He Yang's left leg, there was no blood left from the wound that cut half of the leg. Yehan sat down slumped, his eyes dull like a dead fish. It's too late. A broken leg is usually not a problem as long as the bleeding can be stopped. But the irregular wound with a length of more than 40 centimeters is too deep and heavy, even a professional surgeon would find it difficult, let alone 2 knives like him who only know a little first aid. The fast-handed man with glasses immediately called the emergency number, but he heard the prompt tone that the line was busy. He refused to give up and dialed 120 again. Yehan smiled miserably. Don't bother, there is only 5 liters of blood in a person's body, just open a water bottle. Look at how much blood he has shed. He Yang's blood had already dyed the narrow deck red, and a drop of fresh blood flowed out of the deck, slid into the water along the side of the ship, and slowly dispersed. Professor Qin squeezed in front of Yehan and asked with a pale face, Xiao Ye, are you really helpless? Yehan said bitterly, Elder Qin, do you think I don't want to save him? His blood has already drained. His eyes fell on He Yang's pale face, and his life had already disappeared with his dilated pupils. Old Qin's lips moved, and 1,000 words finally turned into a long sigh. No matter how people don't understand medicine, they also know the consequences of excessive blood loss, and the atmosphere instantly drops to freezing point. Bai Xiaoting leaned on the side of the cabin door and looked around quietly. Her eyes happened to meet He Yang's deadly eyes. Her face changed instantly, and she covered her mouth. A tall and handsome boy suddenly pointed at Ye Han angrily and shouted, "You killed He Yang, call 110 to arrest him." "Wu Ming, what are you talking about?" Professor Qin frowned, and the others looked at Wu Ming in a daze. Everyone knows that He Yang fell into the water. The owner of the boat is responsible, but it is simply unreasonable to blame the owner. Ye Han didn't say a word, and didn't even intend to pay attention to this unreasonable bastard. The incident happened on his boat, and he couldn't get rid of joint responsibility anyway. Even if others didn't call the police, he would have to call himself and wait for the police to come and investigate. Seeing that Ye Han didn't talk to him, Wu Ming sternly accused him, "Watch it, don't let him run away." Ye Han was not a virgin, and raised his blood-stained face, "You have the kind, say it again." The cold words were murderous, making everyone's breath suffocated. Wu Ming became furious, relying on the fact that he was on the boat and shouting sternly, "What's wrong with you? I'm going to beat you up." The unfounded accusation made Ye Han furious. The anger in his eyes was almost real. If it wasn't for the death of someone on board, he would definitely teach this kid a lesson he will never forget. At this moment, under the water behind Wu Ming, a taupe brown spike covered with fluff quietly protruded. Yu reading www.yuuganshu.com followed by the second, third. A student saw a fist-sized, clearly segmented thing emerging from the stern of the ship, with a familiar shape, and a thunder flashed in his mind. This is a leg. It's insect legs. It's the arthropods of insects. An arthropod at least 1 meter long? He was so frightened that he stumbled and almost fell into the water. He pointed at the thing and shivered, so nervous that he couldn't say a word. Bai Xiaoting widened her eyes and covered her mouth tightly. An arthropod stabbed at Wu Ming, and the student used all his strength to break through the barrier between his throat and roared, "Be careful!" Wu Ming turned his head subconsciously, but before he realized what had happened, the limb was suddenly inserted. Hearing a pop, a slightly curved object penetrated Wu Ming's right chest. The blood-stained tip was facing Ye Han's eyebrows, and it would stab his skull within 2 centimeters. The sudden change made everyone pale in shock, and the deck instantly became a mess. Driven by panic and instinct, everyone backed away and instinctively stayed away from Wu Ming. Only Ye Han remained motionless, staring at this blood-stained man with wide eyes. Things. He was so frightened that he couldn't hear any sound, like he was deaf. I don't know how long it took before the nervous heartbeat, the crash of teeth, and the heavy breathing sounded like muffled thunder in his ears. Ye Han's eyes, the thing was as thick as a wrist, with a sharp end. It looked like a bat with a pointed tip. Suddenly the sharp point of the thing lifted, and then hooked down again. Ye Han's blank mind suddenly came up with a thought, "Live, this thing is alive." Yu Reading welcomes all book lovers to come and read. The latest, fastest, and most popular serial works are all available in Yu Reading. Mobile users, please read. Only then did he realize that what pierced Wu Ming was an extremely thick and long worm's leg. At this time, Professor Qin was being pushed back to the cabin by the students. Professor Qin, who couldn't help himself, stumbled and fell forward. Professor Qin screamed subconsciously, but fortunately, he was blocked by the students in front of him, so he didn't really throw a dog and grab the shit. Just as Professor Qin fell down, one of his limbs was as fast as the wind and plunged deep into the outer wall of the cabin with a dull sound. The man with glasses behind Professor Qin only felt a blur in front of his eyes, and he couldn't avoid hitting the thick limb of his arm, causing his glasses to crook. When the man with glasses saw clearly what was in front of him, he couldn't help but shivered, and his heart felt a chill. As long as he was just a little bit faster, a hole the size of a fist would open in his head, and he couldn't help but be afraid. The limb that pierced Wu Ming suddenly lifted up, lifting the tall Wu Ming more than half a meter high. Wu Ming's wound was in severe pain. He clasped his extremities tightly with both hands, trying to use his arms to share the strength of the wound and reduce the pain of the wound. His eyes full of pleading stared at Ye Han, his lips moved with difficulty, as if he wanted to say something. However, a big mouthful of blood poured out of his mouth, blocking all the sounds. Ye Han could see clearly that Wu Ming's mouth was clearly the word "save me." Ye Han finally came back to his senses completely, and withdrew to the stern of the boat with a single step. He opened the door of the fire box and took out a fire axe with mottled red paint. This is the only weapon on the boat. Seeing this scene, Wu Ming's eyes shone with a little hope. Ye Han took a deep breath and calmed his flustered mind. He held the fire axe high and rushed forward, cutting down with all his strength. The axe slashed heavily on the limb that pierced Wu Ming. There was a click, and the axe on the arthropod seemed to be slashed on a dead branch, leaving only a shallow axe mark. Not to mention that the arthropod was not broken, but Ye Han's hands were numb, and he picked on the arthropod. Wu Ming on the top even threw up blood and rolled his eyes. Ye Han was suddenly in a dilemma. The arthropod must have pierced Wu Ming's right lung. With such a serious injury, even if he was treated immediately, it was hard to say whether he would survive or not. It was a miracle that Wu Ming persisted until now. Without splitting the arthropod, Wu Ming would have died because of the aggravation of the injury. At the moment of hesitation, the arthropod carrying Wu Ming suddenly retracted, and at the same time, the other arthropods suddenly pressed down. The cruise ship suddenly tilted to the left and a suppressed exclamation came from the cabin. Ye Han quickly grasped the cabin bracket. He Yang's body was just 2 meters in front of Ye Han. The sloping hull dragged the corpse to the edge of the deck with blood, and slowly passed through the gap under the guardrail, and fell into the water with a pop. Under the side of the ship, a pair of huge compound eyes the size of a wash basin rose out of the water, followed by a pair of short and thick tentacles between the compound eyes, and then a complete and ugly triangular worm protruded out of the side of the ship. Where there is no mouth, only a structure like a shrimp tail covers it. The head of the worm is directly connected to the body of the worm, and there is no neck at all. Ye Han's pupils shrank sharply, and the scorching sun of midsummer was clearly hanging on the horizon, but it was as if he was in a number of cold winters. What kind of monster is this? Damn, is this the rhythm of a horror movie? The giant worm shook Wu Ming's forelimb, moved the limb to his mouth, flipped the shrimp tail upwards, revealing a pair of giant jaws that were bisected on the left and right, and bit Wu Ming's right leg at the knee in one bite. The filthy blood seeped from between the jawbones with the turning of the giant jaws, and the crunching sound of grinding the bones made everyone shudder. The dazed Wu Ming woke up from the pain, but he was trembling in pain, but he couldn't shout, and looked at Ye Han with dead grey in his eyes. Ye Han's heart was torn apart, and a cold sweat broke out instantly. If he knew just now that such a ghost is under the boat, he would never have the courage to chop that axe. There was chaos in the cabin, and the cry of help came to an abrupt end. Ye Han turned his head to see the panicked passengers in the cabin, and suddenly had an untimely thought: these students' psychological quality is really good, and only one of them lost control when encountering such a strange accident. The panic shouting seemed to attract the attention of the giant insect, and an arthropod stabbed the cabin like lightning, pierced the bulkhead heavily, and almost stabbed the student who shouted. The student rolled his eyes and fainted from fright on the spot. The crowd panicked again, but fortunately no one shouted again. The limbs that penetrated the bulkhead hooked, and the sharp ends twisted, as if looking for a target. Ye Han's eyebrows jumped violently, and anxiously waved his hands towards the cabin, using an extremely exaggerated mouth gesture that didn't need to make any sound. Don't make a sound. Everyone's eyes were either on him or on the giant insect. Bai Xiaoting was the first to see Ye Han's gesture. She immediately raised her index finger and made a gesture of silence. Everyone quickly closed their mouths. He had already passed out, and his mouth was still tightly covered by his companions. The limb that pierced the bulkhead stopped and finally slowly pulled out. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief in unison, and turned their eyes to Yehan at the stern. Those eyes were full of begging, struggle, and expectation. And when these eyes looked at the giant insect, Yu was reading www.yuyuganshu.com has only tremors, fear, and horror. Yehan's heart surged. He didn't know where this thing came from, but no matter how he looked at it, such a big bug was a supernatural phenomenon, reminding him of the computer games he played as a child. Looking at the giant insect chewing on the corpse, Yehan felt that this thing did not look like an animal that likes to store food. According to the routine of a disaster movie or a horror movie, after this thing has eaten the corpse, he will definitely hunt down the remaining living people. This ship is too small to withstand the toss of this thing. If you want to survive, you must find a way to escape. Thinking of this, Yehan no longer hesitated, and jumped up to the Tumaturai cabin ceiling. The roof of the cabin is a thin layer of iron. The mottled white roof is hot from the sun. Lying on it, it is like a piece of cake lying on a hot pot, and it is like a barbecue on a red-hot charcoal fire. However, at the critical moment, Yehan couldn't take care of that much. He clinged to the ceiling to avoid the sight of the giant insect, and climbed to the bow with the fastest speed. Although the giant insects only occupy the port side of the ship, and the starboard side can lead to the bow, but Yehan is worried that there are other giant insects lurking in the water, so he would rather climb the top of the ship than take the risk of going to the starboard side. Fortunately, although the giant worm is large, it has no brains like other worms. Yehan climbed onto the cockpit, clasped the ceiling with both hands, and fell lightly under a curled belly. Turning his head, he saw that the giant insect did not respond, and quickly got into the cockpit and locked the door. After the cabin door was closed, the cockpit became an independent closed space, which gave him some sense of security, and his nervousness finally eased a little. Yu Reading welcomes all book lovers to come and read. The latest, fastest, and most popular serial works are all available in Yu Reading. Mobile users, please read. Yehan is very clear that the arthropods of the giant insect can easily pierce the hatch door. The so-called sense of security is just a psychological illusion. The problem is that the brain cannot control this feeling at all. The giant insect's two huge compound eyes suddenly appeared in Yehan's mind. The giant insect has such glasses, the possibility of not seeing him is infinitely close to zero, probably because he is busy eating and can't care about him. A sense of crisis immediately poured out from the bottom of my heart. Time is running out. If you stay for one more second, there is a danger of one more second. Yehan hurriedly started the engine, and there was a sudden roar in the belly of the boat. Yehan looked back in his busy schedule, and found that the giant insect seemed to be aware of it, and actually stopped eating. Looking at the pair of huge compound eyes, he even had the illusion that the giant insect was blinking. There was a sudden shock in his heart. Yehan resisted the uneasiness and pushed the accelerator lightly. The propeller in the water turned from static, stirring the water flow quickly. The hull that had been stagnant for a long time moved forward slowly and steadily accelerated. It seemed that he felt the movement of the ship. The giant insect's forelimbs suddenly pressed down, the hull suddenly tilted to the left, and there was chaos in the cabin again, but this time no one shouted. Even if he couldn't control his mouth, at least he knew how to cover his mouth tightly. The speed of the boat was getting faster and faster. Under the impact of the current, the giant worm's amazing body lifted out of the water. As the speed of the boat increased, the worm's legs gradually showed signs of slipping. The giant worm couldn't even care about the corpse hanging on its legs. Several arthropods were scratching, hooking the side of the ship, pressing the hull to a large extent. The edge was almost flush with the water surface, and the hull was at any time there is a possibility of overturning. The guardrail made of welded steel pipes was like noodles being torn apart by giant insects, causing Yehan's lips to tremble in pain. This is all money. But now is not the time to feel distressed about money. If the giant worm continues to climb up, maybe even the boat will have to get in. At that time, it will really be a widow and a dead child. Yehan broke out in a cold sweat, turned around and shouted at the cabin, "Keep to the right, keep to the right!" Everyone crawled to the right, and even Professor Chin, who was far inferior to the young man, moved to the right with the help of the students. The massive hull of the ship has finally recovered a bit, but the symptoms are not cured. As long as the giant insect hanging on the port side climbs up, the ship will be destroyed and the death will be right in front of you. How to do? Sweat flowed into the corner of Yehan's eyes, and the sting caused his eyes to hurt. He blinked quickly, and suddenly saw yacht number 417 in front of the left. A bold thought arose in Yehan's heart. He turned the rudder without hesitation and rushed towards boat 417. At this time, the straight line distance between the two boats was less than 30 meters. The faster and faster fishing swims went straight to the 417 boat. Everyone who saw this scene was stunned. Bai Xiaoting's eyes widened in astonishment. What does he want to do? She didn't think Yehan would be at this moment seeing that the two boats were about to collide. I don't know who made an exclamation, "He's crazy." The exclamation immediately set off everyone's emotions. Yehan didn't pay any attention to the movement in the cabin, and focused all his attention on the 417 boat. At the critical moment when the distance between the two boats was only 3 to 5 meters, and they were about to collide, he turned the rudder suddenly to the right, and the fisherman who couldn't brake was too late. You slammed into the 417 boat heavily on the port side, making a dull loud noise. The collision caused chaos in the cabin. The instruments that were originally placed on the small table fell one after another, and several students who couldn't respond fell into a ball. The giant worm caught between the two ships, like a cockroach trampled by an urchin, made a clear and crisp explosion. Yehan didn't dare to be careless, and drove Yu closely to the number 417 boat to rub forward, squeezing the giant worm caught between the two boats. The giant jaw of the giant worm opened painfully, and a foul-smelling liquid mixed with worm blood, human blood, pieces of meat and broken bones poured out of the worm's jaw, and the viscous liquid fell on the deck, spreading a thick layer. When the deck got on the stench filled the sky, causing the cabin to vomit, as if everyone had turned into a pregnant woman. The two boats slowly separated, the giant worm hooked on the huge arthropod on the port side soft and loose, and slowly sank into the water with Wu Ming, whose life and death were unknown, and the fishing trip finally regained its balance. Yehan rushed out of the cockpit for the first time, endured the pungent stench on the edge of the deck and looked out, and found a finger-width crack on the port side of the hull. Yehan's complexion changed greatly, staring at the crack, wanting to cry without tears. When the two ships collided, he felt that the sound of the collision was a little wrong, but he did not expect that the waterline was damaged. Professor Chin found that Yehan's expression was wrong, so he quickly asked with concern. "Little Leaf, what's wrong?" Professor Chin has experienced too many twists and turns in his 70-year life. Although the situation he is currently encountering is unheard of, he is still able to maintain his composure. "The boat is leaking." Yehan's expression was very solemn, at most 10 minutes. Although the crack is not wide, Yehan's boat is not too big, and the speed of receiving the leaking water is too late to return to the dock. There was an uproar in the cabin. "Then what are you waiting for? Let's change boats," the man with glasses said, pointing to boat 417, which was close at hand. When everyone heard this, they nodded, and they seemed to change boats immediately. Yehan turned to look at the deck of the 417 boat and shook his head. "Come and see for yourself. If you are willing to change boats, I will not stop me." After that, he went straight to the cockpit, without saying a word of redundant words. Sometimes, it is better to take a look at it in person than to explain 10,000 sentences. The thin man with glasses was as nimble as a monkey. He was the first to jump out of the cabin. Yu read www.yuyuganshu.com glanced at the deck of 417. A cold air instantly rushed from the solace of his feet to the top of his head, and he retreated with a pale face. Return. The deck of 417 was stained with blood, but there was only blood and no corpses, and a hole with a diameter of no less than 2 meters was opened in the front bulkhead. Although it is not clear what happened on the 417 boat, anyone with normal thinking ability who sees this scene can guess what happened to the 417 boat. The others rushed out of the cabin one after another, but the result was similar to the man with glasses, and they returned with a broken face. Although Bai Xiaoting didn't see the situation on the 417 boat with her own eyes, she could see some clues from the expressions of her companions. Fear quickly overwhelmed her curiosity, and she resolutely gave up the idea of satisfying her curiosity. Several boys whispered to discuss, and one of them said loudly, "Brother Yat, send us to that ship." "Zhou Yang, what do you want to do?" Professor Qin asked. Although he didn't leave the cabin, how could he not guess what Bai Xiaoting could guess? "Professor, at least you won't drown in that boat," the strong Zhou Yang retorted. Ye Han said solemnly, "I won't stop you if you want to change boats, but I have to say it first. My boat can't go back to the dock, but I can drive to the island in the center of the lake in 5 minutes at most." Several boys were stunned for a moment, and Professor Qin said angrily, "Then what are you waiting for? Hurry up and start the boat." Zhou Yang and the others woke up like a dream and quickly returned to the cabin. Ye Han, who never believed in any gods, closed his eyes and started the engine. The familiar roar came into his ears. He immediately let out a long sigh of relief, and immediately set off for the fishing tour to the island in the center of the lake. Yu Reading welcomes all book lovers to come and read. The latest, fastest, and most popular serial works are all available in Yu Reading. Mobile users, please read. Ye Han said that the boat could last 10 minutes, but in fact he had no bottom at all. The crack on the port side has a limited rate of water leakage, but the ship is too small to have a structure as tall as a watertight compartment. The water that leaks into the ship can flow directly into the mechanical compartment. Once the engine enters the water, it will definitely lose power immediately. He must drive the boat to the island in the middle of the lake before the engine shuts down. The fishing trip was getting faster and faster with the roar of the engine, leaving the 417 far behind, and it seemed that everyone's worries and fears were left there together. The tense atmosphere in the cabin gradually increased as the distance increased. After the relaxation, everyone took their seats one after another, recalling the encounter not long ago, secretly glad that they escaped. Probably because the previous encounter was too shocking, the expressions on everyone's faces changed again and again, but no one spoke, and an indescribable depression permeated everyone's heart. Zhou Yang coughed to break the silence. "Professor, if such a big thing happened, should we call the police?" Yes, you should call the police immediately." Someone immediately echoed. "What did the police say?" "Say we encountered a mutant giant insect and 2 people died." Li Yang asked with his head held high, "The police believe that you are a ghost. So many people have seen it with their own eyes." A trace of anger flashed in Zhou Yang's eyes. Li Yang pushed the glasses that had slipped due to sweat. "I agree with the police, but I can't tell the truth. It's not StarCraft, but you are the police. Do you believe in giant bugs or something? Then what do you say?" Zhou Yang directly kicked the ball to Li Yang. "What's the point of asking?" Li Yang habitually twitched the corners of his mouth. "For another reason to recruit the police, if such a big thing happens, we'll have to recruit people first." There was a sudden muffled sound at the bottom of the boat, everyone's feet shook, and the regular roar in the belly gradually weakened. Everyone turned their attention to the cockpit. Professor Qin hurriedly asked, "Little Yat, why did the boat stop?" Ye Han was sweating profusely. "There's something in the water, and it hit the boat." He tried to start the engine as he spoke, but no matter how hard he tried, the engine didn't respond at all. Zhou Yang was furious, and said in a hurry, "What are you doing with your eyes? Why don't you look at it?" Ye Han turned back suddenly, his sharp eyes slashed like a knife. "You have eyes, why don't you look in the water?" Zhou Yang was at a loss for words. Li Yang patted his forehead, quickly picked up He Yang's tablet computer, opened it and looked shocked. Professor, there are many bugs in the water. Professor Qin hurriedly took the tablet, but on the palm-sized screen, huge shadows shuttled back and forth, biting and making noise. Now Professor Qin panicked, and urged, "Little Yat, hurry up, you can't stay here." Ye Han rushed out of the cab without a word, strode towards the stern and said in a low voice, "Come with me, if you don't want to die, be quiet." "What do you want to do?" Zhou Yang also kept his voice very low. The bottom of the boat is the worm's nest, and he wouldn't dare to be arrogant when he was killed. Ye Han ignored him at all, and Zhou Yang's face sank involuntarily. Zhang Yang, a man with glasses, leaned over to Professor Qin and asked, "Professor, what do you think?" Professor Qin said softly, "Help me over there." Zhang Yang immediately supported Professor Qin, Bai Xiaoting immediately supported Professor Qin's other arm, and the others followed behind Professor Qin in silence. Zhou Yang's expression changed a bit, and he followed at the end with a dark face. It is not far from the island in the center of the lake, and the straight line distance is no more than 200 meters at most. With Zhou Yang's water ability, there is no problem swimming over there, but at this time, how dare he go into the water and play with insects? Ye Han rushed to the stern, carefully lifted the deck, pulled out a rope and fastened it to the railing, and said to the crowd, "Help me! I'm coming!" Zhang Yang suggested himself, "What are you doing?" Ye Han reached out and grabbed the things under the deck, and gestured towards the stern, "Raise it and put it in the water." The two of them worked together to lift the thing under the deck. Zhang Yang misestimated the weight of the thing, and almost fell into the hole accidentally. "What is so heavy?" "The inflatable life raft is for emergency use." Ye Han twitched the corners of his mouth, reminding Zhang Yang to handle it carefully, and then gently put the life raft into the water. In fact, Ye Han can throw the life raft into the water himself, but underwater is the worm's nest. If there is too much movement, the giant worm will be drawn out, so it must be as silent as possible. The life raft entered the water. Ye Han violently pulled the rope on the raft, and the folded life raft quickly inflated with the dull sound of inflation, turning into a rubber boat in an instant. Ye Han took out a few orange-eared life jackets from under the deck, one for each person, put it on first, listen carefully, and then you can pull the rope when you fall into the water. A flash of surprise flashed in Bai Xiaoting's eyes. She didn't expect Ye Han, a greedy owner, to prepare such a complete set of life-saving equipment on board. After she saw Ye Han put on the life jacket, she hung a small bag the size of a palm on her waist. Everyone took the life jackets and put them on one after another. Zhang Yang asked, "Why don't you get on the boat?" Ye Han pointed to the water, "Wait a minute." After saying that, he looked around. Yu reading www.yuuganshu.com leaned over to pick up the glass bottle containing the water sample in the cabin and threw it far away with all his strength. The movement of the rubber raft is not small when it is inflated. Maybe it has been stared at by the giant insect. If the rubber raft is overturned by the giant insect, it will be completely over. The glass bottle drew a high arc and landed on the water surface dozens of meters away, causing layers of water waves, and then threw a second one. Since sound can attract giant insects, it is better to make sound to lure giant insects away. "Come on board, the ship will sink soon," Zhou Yang said impatiently. "Shut your mouth and no one thinks you are dumb." Ye Han glared at Zhou Yang, then Ye Han picked up the tablet and saw the giant insects swimming away from the bottom of the boat, so he dragged the rubber raft to the side of the boat and held onto it. The railing carefully stepped on the bottom of the soft cotton raft. "Come, listen to my instructions, one by one." At this time, the flooding of the fishing tour was very serious, and the stern deck was basically the same height as the rubber raft. Zhang Yang was the first to cross the railing and board the rubber raft with the help of Ye Han. He wanted to stay with Ye Han to help others, but was stopped by Ye Han. "Get on the bow and sit still, the boat overturned us. Finish playing together." Zhang Yang's face changed slightly, and he carefully stepped to the bow of the boat and sat down. The others boarded the boat under Ye Han's command, and sat down in the designated position. Even the dazed boy didn't fall. After everyone was transferred, Ye Han took up the short hard plastic boat paddle and pushed it on the fishing tour, and the rubber boat swayed away. "Who can row?" Ye Han asked in a very low voice. Yu Reading welcomes all book lovers to come and read. The latest, fastest, and most popular serial works are all available in Yu Reading. Mobile users, please read. This rubber boat can seat 10 people, which is exactly the same as the passenger capacity of a fishing tour. The distance between the left and right is quite large, and he cannot take care of it alone. But only paddling on one side can't control the course of the rubber boat, so you have to find someone to balance on the other side. A few boys look at me, I look at you, no one makes a sound. I've never eaten pork before and I've seen pigs run. Rowing is nothing more than sticking the pulp into the water and rowing. It's not difficult at all, but Ye Han's question made a few boys hesitate. What a special attention! In fact, Ye Han just wanted to find someone to cooperate with, he had no other intentions at all. Seeing this, Professor Qin sighed, "I'm coming. I'll do it." Bai Xiaoting took the oars directly from Ye Han. "You?" Ye Han was astonished, not knowing how to describe this girl. In a critical moment, most people's reaction is panic and panic. They only know that they blindly follow other people's actions. Only a few can control their fears and stay rational. Very few are calm, and this girl's performance is better than most boys. Are much stronger. Bai Xiaoting smiled slightly, "I grew up by the lake." "Oh." Ye Han nodded, "Take it easy, don't make a sound." Seeing Bai Xiaoting nodding, Ye Han made a gesture of the beginning, and the two paddles plunged into the water, one left and one right, and gently stroked, trying not to make any noise. The same rhythm. Under the control of the two of them, the rubber boat started to accelerate and headed straight to the island in the middle of the lake not far away. About 30 to 40 meters away, there was a sudden clatter behind, and everyone looked back subconsciously, only to see an ugly and terrible giant insect grabbing the stern of the fishing boat with its slender limbs, and its curled mouth parts opened and closed. Sweeping across the deck continuously, sweeping the stinky mucus on the deck into his mouth, and then another giant insect jumped out of the water and joined the ranks of cleaning the deck. Several people almost vomited on the spot. Professor Qin keenly noticed that these two giant insects were not of the same species as the previous one. Ye Han watched the lake flow over the deck, and his heart was so painful that he almost vomited blood, and his face was terribly distorted. This is the end of the boat, how will the future live? The comatose boy suddenly opened his eyes wide and jumped up and sat up, just in time to see two giant insects grabbing the fishing tour, and immediately screamed. Zhou Yang was frightened, he snatched the boat oars from Bai Xiaoting's hand, and let out a muffled roar from his father and mother's marriage, "Row!" The giant insect was behind him. His emotions were almost out of control, and he had long forgotten about controlling his voice. To the back of the head. The roar scared Ye Han into a smart fight, wishing he could kick the two pitiful pig teammates into the water, but the matter had come to this point, and he had no way to remedy it, so he could only row the boat with all his strength, and the rubber dinghy the speed rose suddenly. Bai Xiaoting stared at Zhou Yang in anger, but Zhou Yang didn't notice it at all. He only knew that rowing and rowing again, the frequency of the water entering the boat was frighteningly high, causing a series of clattering sounds. In order to maintain the forward direction, Ye Han can only speed up the frequency of paddling, keeping one with Zhou Yang. The result of the high-frequency paddling was that his arms were sore and numb, and he almost vomited blood in depression. Dog. Japanese, how about a ball? It's not as good as a bitch. The two giant insects seemed to be aware of it, and turned their heads together to stare at the rubber boat. One of them let go of the half-submerged fishing tour and quietly dived underwater. Under the water, a water trail like a torpedo track came straight to the rubber boat. Ye Han's heart jumped to her throat. Quick stroke by Xiaoting was the first to lean over and paddled the water with her hands to help the rubber boat accelerate. Although the paddling didn't help much, at this time, even if the speed was so fast, it would be good. It was a matter of life and life, so the others immediately reached out to help. Ye Han was not the only one who wanted to kick the pig teammate into the water. Even Professor Qin was very dissatisfied with the panic of the two students. It's not your fault that you can't help you, it's your fault that you bring danger. Isn't this what a proper teammate of the pit father pig is? The island in the center of the lake is getting closer and closer, and the track of the giant insect is gradually approaching. In any case, it is impossible to reach the island in the center of the lake before the giant insect catches up with the rubber boat. Ye Han can't help sinking. Seeing that the track was only 5 or 6 meters away from the rubber boat, Ye Han couldn't help but frown, and squeezed a few words from between his teeth. Stop, don't move. The track is generated when the giant worm moves underwater, and its position is slightly behind the actual position of the giant worm. Therefore, even if the track has not caught up, the giant worm has actually reached the bottom of the rubber boat. Anyway, I can't run away. Making a move at this time is equivalent to guiding the giant worm, waiting quietly, maybe a miracle will happen. This is not a deep theory. Ye Han was chased by a dog when he was a child. The more he ran fast, the dog will keep chasing and standing still, but it will make the dog lose interest. Ye Han didn't know if the giant worm had the same habit, but the situation could no longer allow him to think too much. Only the dead horse was the living horse doctor. Everyone stopped their hands when they heard the words, and their nervous eyes kept scanning the surface of the water. Only Zhou Yang turned a deaf ear, still burying his head and paddling. Ye Han was so angry that he raised the oars and wanted to give Zhou Yang a hit. He didn't want something as thick as a baby's arm to pop up underwater, piercing the airbag beside Zhou Yang with a poof, and click again. A stab on the oars in Zhou Yang's hand. Zhou Yang, who was almost frightened, was completely unprepared. He screamed in horror. The high-pitched cry even broke. The thing that had pierced the airbag retracted like lightning, leaving only the hissing rubber raft and the terrified passengers on board. Ye Han raised the oars and was about to pat Zhou Yang's head, but he didn't want Zhou Yang's cry to stop abruptly, and his terrified expression suddenly turned into despair. Zhou Yang only felt a sharp pain in his buttocks, like a black hole sitting under his buttocks. All the organs in the body contracted towards the same place. He suddenly found that everyone's eyes were focused on him, and there was fear, and sympathy in everyone's eyes, and then he lost his last consciousness, and there was only indelible horror and regret on his dry face. Ye Han was taken aback, and the others were equally terrified. The lake water poured out from under Zhou Yang and drowned the insteps of everyone in a very short period of time. Ye Han pushed Zhou Yang's body away, only to see a hole as thick as an egg in the bottom of the rubber boat under Zhou Yang. A thing the size of a thumb sank into the water from the broken place like a periscope, and the lake water poured into the boat like a spring. Everyone was stunned by this sudden change. The boy who had just woken up suddenly jumped off the rubber raft and plunged into the water. UU Reading welcomes all book lovers to come and read. The latest, fastest, and most popular serial works are all available in UU Reading. Mobile users, please read. Ye Han subconsciously stretched out his hand to pull, but his reaction was a step too slow to catch the boy, so he could only watch him jump into the water. The rubber raft floats on the water by the buoyancy of the airbag, and there is a hole in the bottom that can let in at most water, so there is absolutely no danger of sinking. And there are several compartments in the airbag, and a hole is nothing at all. When the boy came out of the water again, he was 7 or 8 meters away. After he surfaced, he immediately started a beautiful freestyle swim to the island in the center of the lake. At this time, the distance between the rubber raft and the shore was only 40 to 50 meters. In a blink of an eye, the boy had swum halfway, but several people on the boat were horrified to find that a track suddenly appeared near the rubber raft, chasing the boy like a torpedo. The boy who was just running for his life didn't realize it. Suddenly, there was a scream of misery, and the freestyle instantly turned into a dog. Point to the boy in the water. Several people on the rubber raft all changed color. Yehan picked up the paddle and rowed without a word. There was only one paddle left on the boat. In order to maintain the course, he had to row twice to the left, and then quickly ran to the right to row twice. Li Yang sat directly next to Yehan and gave Yehan a cooperative look. He was very scared in his heart, but he was a man after all, and he didn't want to behave like Bai Xiaoting. Anyone who is familiar with Bai Xiaoting knows that this girl looks like a soft girl, but she is actually a female guy. She is also the kind of top female guy who dares to watch horror movies alone in the middle of the night. Yehan raised his brows slightly, stretched out his hand and picked up another oars from the water and handed it over, and said in a low voice, "Paddle quickly, it will be a shiver if you succeed." The giant insects underwater were all led away by the boys in the water. The rubber raft was temporarily complete, and it was necessary to get to the shore before the giant insects stared at the rubber raft again. Li Yang was startled and silently took over the oars. Bai Xiaoting's eyes flashed and she couldn't bear to turn her head away. The diving boy distracted the giant insect, and everyone took the opportunity to row the life raft to the shore. Although she understood that diving for her life was the boy's decision and had nothing to do with other people, but such an opportunity to escape still made her feel a little guilty. But it's one thing to feel guilty or not to be guilty, and another thing to escape your life. The dead are not qualified to feel guilty. The rubber raft quickly slid over a distance of more than 20 meters, and Yehan was relieved until he saw the bottom of the lake through the water. The water depths around the island in the center of the lake are different. The water is the deepest in the direction of the wharf, and this direction is a shoal with a depth of no more than 1 meter. With the size of the giant insect, it will inevitably arch out of the water when it is close to the shoal. The giant insects hidden underwater are the dangerous giant insects. The giant insects that come out of the water are exposed, and they can completely control the rubber raft to avoid them calmly. The danger is incomparable. But the shoal was only relatively safe. Yehan didn't dare to relax at all, until the rubber raft landed, and his heart that was hanging in the air did not return to his stomach. After the rubber raft landed, a few people couldn't wait to get off the boat. Zhang Yang took a few steps and sat on the ground, looking back at the lake with lingering fear. His cheeks twitched involuntarily. "It's finally safe." Yehan murmured and dragged the rubber raft to the shore with a tangled face. "It's a big loss, a big loss." "You." Bai Xiaoting's face was full of black lines. "What time is it? So many people died, you still think about money." Yehan's face was wrinkled. "Please, I'm not an immortal, what can I eat if I don't have money? Besides, if someone dies on my boat, I won't have the money to pay for it, and the insurance company will definitely default." "You don't have to eat even if you die." Bai Xiaoting stared angrily. Yehan pouted, "Pretend to be arrogant, like you don't eat." "Xiaoting, don't say a word." Professor Qin issued the highest order. "Xiao, I am indeed responsible for this matter. I don't dare to say it for you, but I will definitely find a way to make you satisfied." "Yes, with your words, I'll be satisfied." Yehan accepted it when he saw it. "This is an accident, an accident." Bai Xiaoting jumped with anger. Yehan glanced at Professor Qin. "It's an accident, but if you don't charter a boat, if I don't sail, I won't run into those bugs, and I won't even take the boat in, don't you think?" Strong words. Bai Xiaoting blushed with anger. "You don't look like a poor man, have you ever lived a poor life?" Yehan said crookedly, "If I have 18 million, it's fine to give you the boat to play with calmly, but I don't even have 18 million. I don't have 10 yuan, and I can't even hold my face and beg for food. What do you think I should do?" "You." "Yes, don't mind you, mine, we don't have money, we can't have ambition, if not, we'll go to court and apply for arbitration. If the judge says you're not responsible, I won't give you a penny, will it work?" All right, Xiao Ting, how old are you? Don't even look at Wen, what are you talking about? Professor Qin scolded. Bai Xiaoting snorted and didn't speak. Yehan secretly cursed the old fox. The old man and the ghost are old and slippery. The surnamed Qin must have thought that Yehan wanted to deceive people, so he deliberately let Bai Xiaoting out. Let's call the police first. Zhang Yang suggested. Seeing Professor Qin nodding, Yu reads www.yuyuganshu.com. Zhang Yang immediately took out his mobile phone, but helplessly found that the mobile phone was soaked in water, and pressed his knee against his companion. Wu Liang, where's your phone? Wu Liang weakly pointed to the lake. The boat is on board. There were only 5 people who successfully landed. Except for Yehan, Bai Xiaoting, Professor Qin, and Zhang Yang, it was this boy named Wu Liang. At this time, the fishing tour has not sunk, and a cabin roof can still be seen. Bai Xiaoting took out a cartoon fruit phone from her bag and handed it over. Use mine. Zhang Yang smiled and took over the phone, and immediately dialed the alarm. Yehan's ears perked up instinctively. The call was connected, and a clear voice came from the receiver. Hello. Zhang Yang's expression lifted. Hey, I'm on the island in the heart of the lake. Something happened, and someone died. Island in the heart of the lake? What is the island in the heart of the lake? We have already received a report and sent someone over there. Ah! Zhang Yang was stunned for a moment, looking at everyone blankly. Who called the police? Several people look at me, I look at you, and shake their heads together to indicate that they are not themselves. Yehan grabbed the phone and said, Hey, dead, 4 dead. Why is it the island in the heart of the lake again? The voice on the other side suddenly became much more urgent. Where are you, and what is the specific situation? He has just received several alarm calls from Huixin Island, but the content of the alarm is simply inexplicable. He doesn't know if the call will be a prank again. The west coast of the island in the heart of the lake. Who did you send here? Do you have a gun? Who are you and what do you want to do? The voice on the phone immediately became alert. Yu Reading welcomes all book lovers to come and read. The latest, fastest, and most popular serial works are all available in Yu Reading. Mobile users, please read. Zhang Yang reminded in a low voice, no one will believe giant insects. Yehan shook his heart and said loudly, this is not an accident, this is a terrorist attack. We must send heavy firepower here. The special police can't do it. Contact the armed police and the People's Liberation Army quickly. What? What are you kidding? Who is joking with you? Yehan was furious. You don't know how to watch the surveillance on Huixin Island? If you can't, contact the military, use drones, helicopters, or military satellites. Are you crazy? I repeat, this is a terrorist attack, and the situation is extremely serious. If you don't want to sacrifice the police in vain, you must send heavy firepower. Yehan yelled at the phone, what are you talking to me about answering the phone? Hurry up and tell your leaders as I said. Report, you are fully responsible for not reporting the accident, and you are not responsible after reporting it, do you understand? The opposite side was silent for a moment and said, I see. Hurry up. Yehan hung up the phone angrily and handed the phone back to Bai Xiaoting with a sullen face. Can it be done? Bai Xiaoting asked. Do your best to obey the destiny. Yehan smiled bitterly, this is a worm, the worm with the strongest vitality. Ordinary police officers are only equipped with pistols. Submachine guns are considered heavy equipment in police equipment. Insects have extremely strong vitality. It is a bit unreliable to use light weapons to deal with giant insects. It's fine if you have a gun. This isn't Starship Troopers. Is it possible that you can't kill a bug with a gun? Wu Liang squinted at Yehan and said. Professor Qin said angrily, it's a pity that you are still a student of biology, don't you know how powerful insects are? Wu Liang defended, the giant worm is so big, can it be compared with the small worm? How do you know that giant insects are different from small insects? Professor Qin asked back. Professor, listen to me. Ye Han advised. There are other people who called the police. There must be something wrong on the island. This place is not safe. We must leave immediately. Zhang Yang jumped up. Yes, yes, someone must have called the police when something went wrong. Ye Han nodded. There are usually a lot of people in this place, but today there aren't any. It's too abnormal. Just now, he just ran for his life and didn't pay attention, and it was only now that he realized that something was wrong. Professor Qin said in a low voice, "Where shall we go?" "Go to the dock, there are boats there, we can run as far as we want." Wu Liang said eagerly, "I don't want to stay here for a minute or a second. It's not that I usually read a lot of fantasy novels. Anyone who encounters such a mess today will have a nervous breakdown." Wu Liang's opinion was unanimously agreed by everyone. Ye Han was most familiar with the situation on the island in the heart of the lake, and he did his part to lead the way. The island in the center of the lake is not large, only about 1 square kilometer, but the island was originally a hill, so the island has mountains and valleys and the terrain is complicated. The path was hidden among the lush trees, and the cool shade of the trees swept away the heat of midsummer almost instantly, which lifted everyone's spirits. Bai Xiaoting stepped over the root of a knotted tree sticking out of the ground, and asked curiously, "Grandpa, why are the red cloth strips tied to these trees?" Although the forest is dense, but there are no shrubs in the forest, so the line of sight is excellent, and you can see it at a glance. It can be seen far away, and there is no need to worry about giant insects hiding nearby. Ye Han glanced at her in surprise. When did she think of this? Are women's nerves too thick? This is 100-year-old tree, and the customs are different in different places. In some places, the red cloth strips are tied to pray for blessings, and in some places, the old tree is afraid that it will become a spirit. Professor Qin explained. Wu Liang sneered, "I don't know if the tree is good or not, but I know that the bugs are all good. I took it to shoot Starship Troopers, and even the special effects were omitted." Zhang Yang asked thoughtfully, "Professor, where do you think the giant worm came from? It may be a genetic mutation caused by chemical pollution, or it may be a genetic mutation caused by radiation, but now we know too little. If there is no investigation, there is no right to speak. It is hard to say what the reason is." Professor Qin said cautiously. Ye Han was stunned when he heard the words, "Professor Qin, do you think the fish in the lake were eaten up by these insects?" "It's possible, it's very possible." Professor Qin nodded heavily. "It's impossible for a giant worm to grow so big out of thin air, it must consume enough food." Ye Han's eyes were distant. Could it be that the fish had eaten up and were so hungry that they ran ashore to eat people? The path is not long and the is not large. A few people crossed the ridge while talking, and everyone was condescending, and the pier of the lake island was in sight. Ye Han suddenly waved his hand, "Stop!" The atmosphere suddenly became tense, and Zhang Yang, who followed Ye Han, asked in a low voice, "What's the matter?" "Look!" Ye Han pointed to the pier. "What are you looking at?" Zhang Yang curiously probed his brain. "Get out of the way, what can you see with two big glasses?" "Look at me." Wu Liang pulled away and glanced in the direction of the pier, and said in surprise, "Where's the boat? Where have the boats gone?" Ye Han took out a pocket telescope from the small bag on his waist and held it over his eyes to carefully observe the situation on the pier. "There is blood on the pier, a lot of blood, but no corpses." The pier was covered with blue-grey slate, and the blood congealed on the slate was very obvious. Yu reading www.yuuganshu.com. Professor Qin sighed, "We take it for granted. The giant worm must have come before. How could the ship continue to stay on the dock when such a strange thing happened?" The hearts of several people sank in unison. "Then what should we do?" Stuck here and wait to die? Wu Liang shouted anxiously. What are you arguing about? Haven't you already called the police? Zhang Yang raised his voice unconsciously. I will take the police boat and go. Wu Liang pursed his lips and said nothing. Yehan put down the telescope and said, Professor, there is blood on the edge of the square, maybe the giant worm can come ashore. The dock on the island in the center of the lake is connected to a small square. The farthest point from the water is more than 100 meters. If the giant insects cannot go ashore, there will never be so many bloodstains on the edge of the square. Everyone was stunned. Bai Xiaoting grabbed Professor Qin's arm in a hurry. Wu Liang's face turned pale. What should I do? What can I do? At the critical moment, Professor Qin calmly patted his granddaughter's little hand. Little yet, is there any stronger buildings on the island? Let's find a place to hide first. Yes. Yehan's eyes lit up. Lakeview Hotel, it must be the strongest place on the island. Bai Xiaoting was extremely surprised. There is still a hotel on such a small island. Xiaoting. Professor Qin gave her a dissatisfied look. Xiao, please lead the way. No problem. Yehan nodded happily. The hotel is at the southernmost edge of the island in the heart of the lake. Keep going south, the tallest building is. Bai Xiaoting looked to the south curiously, but her eyes were blocked by the layers of tree trunks, branches, and leaves, so she couldn't see the slightest clue. UU Reading welcomes all book lovers to come and read. The latest, fastest, and most popular serial works are all available in UU Reading. Mobile users, please read. Thanks to all the book friends for their collections and rewards. Although I won't list them all here, I know them all in my heart. Thanks again. The terrain on the north side of the island in the center of the lake is ups and downs, so the wharf is built on the north of the island, while the terrain in the south of the island is relatively flat, so most of the entertainment facilities on the island are placed on the south side of the island in the center of the lake, including the only one on the island. Hotel. The group turned around and walked more than 10 meters under the leadership of Yehan. The pier was blocked by the mountain ridge. Several people breathed a sigh of relief at the same time, just like the mountain ridge blocked the pier, and at the same time blocked the danger on the other side of the mountain. Yehan walked silently at the front of the team, scanning every inch of land in his sight with vigilance. The giant worm is huge. As long as you avoid the position that is enough to hide the giant worm, the possibility of being attacked is so small that it can be ignored. Yehan's footsteps suddenly stagnated. He closed his eyes, raised his ears, and listened. Listen. After losing sight, other senses of a person will become more sensitive. Everyone stopped together, looked at each other suspiciously, and shook their heads. Professor Qin asked cautiously, What are you listening to? Yehan suddenly opened his eyes, and ran back in surprise. It's a boat is coming. Have a boat? Bai Xiaoting bit her lip and grabbed Professor Qin's arm. Wu Liang ran away without thinking, chasing after Yehan tightly, only hating her father and mother for having 2 fewer legs. Zhang Yang instinctively took 2 steps, then stopped abruptly, glanced at Bai Xiaoting, who had a frosty face, and stepped back to support Professor Qin's other arm. Teacher, I'll support you. Professor Qin was so relieved that the wrinkles on his face bloomed. Crossing the mountain ridge, a few people saw Yehan holding a telescope at a glance. Wu Liang was around Yehan anxiously rubbing his hands and stomping his feet. The calm lake was unobstructed, and a white-backed police speedboat painted with dark blue stripes chopped the waves and quickly sailed to the island in the center of the lake. Yehan put down the binoculars in surprise, turned around suddenly and said, It's a police boat, the police are here. I'll take a look, I'll take a look. Wu Liang couldn't wait to pass the binoculars and looked at the lake impatiently. Great! Bai Xiaoting hugged Professor Qin excitedly. Although she couldn't see if the boat was a police boat, at least she could see where it was. In delight, Professor Qin glared at his granddaughter. How old are you, still like a child? Can your grandfather and my old bones stand up to you? Bai Xiaoting laughed, Grandpa is in good health, what is this? Let's go down quickly. Wu Yang was as anxious as an ant on a hot pot, but he didn't dare to run down the mountain alone. Who knows if there are giant insects hidden under the mountain? Professor, let's go down. Ye Han couldn't hide his excitement, laughing so much that his nose was not his eyes, not his eyes. Those who have struggled on the line of death know the value of survival better than anyone else. Professor Qin smiled and nodded, okay, let's go down. Bang bang, 2 gunshots came, interrupting Professor Qin's words, and everyone's expressions changed immediately. Ye Han took back the telescope, no, it's a giant insect. But in the blink of an eye, 3 large worms with a length of 1 person and chubby bodies had already climbed on both sides of the police boat. The 2 policemen on board shot the giant worms with pistols. Ye Han's heart sank immediately. There were 4 policemen on board, but only 2 fired. Obviously, the other 2 policemen were not armed at all. He has already reminded the alarm center that heavy firepower must be sent here. Why can't the police send only 1 pistol to do one? The fleshy giant worms didn't care about bullets at all. One of them probed, and its long thin mouth instantly pierced a policeman who was shooting. The policeman shrank quickly at a speed visible to the naked eye, and the pistol slipped out of his palm. An empty-handed policeman swooped on his colleague and tried to catch the pistol, but he didn't want to take a step back. The gun swiped his fingertips and hit the side of the boat and bounced into the lake. The policeman fell heavily on the deck, and another giant worm looked down at him like a mountain that was about to fall, and then jumped down suddenly. The policeman only had time to let out a scream that stopped abruptly, and then went silent. The 3rd policeman ran out of bullets in his gun and was rushing to load bullets, when the 3rd giant worm threw himself into the water. The last policeman gritted his teeth and increased the speed of the speedboat to the highest speed. Suddenly, the body of the boat swung horizontally and passed just above the giant insect that had just entered the water. The spinning propeller instantly cut dozens of lines on the giant insect with more than 1 palm. Deep cuts. The giant flesh worms slammed together and bounced off like a spring, and the water splashed with big splashes. The policeman who fell into the water climbed out of the water more than 10 meters away. When he looked back, he was almost scared to death, and swam to the island in the center of the lake like crazy. However, he only swam out more than 10 meters, then he suddenly struggled to sink into the water, and was never able to surface again. The only policeman left on the speedboat had no chance to pick up the comrade who fell into the water. He drove the speedboat to the island in the center of the lake at the highest speed, and he was lucky enough to wash up on the beach. The hearts of everyone raised their throats together. The policeman jumped off the speedboat without thinking, and ran as fast as he could with milk. He didn't even bother to pick up the walkie-talkie. As soon as he ran more than 5 meters away, an ugly giant insect crawled out of the water. www.yuyuganshu.com pounced heavily on the speedboat. The policeman stumbled and fell to the ground. When he turned around, he suddenly lost his mind. He kicked his feet and tried his best to step back. Instead of escaping, he attracted the attention of the giant insect. Between. The policeman stared at the worm's leg between his legs with wide eyes, his face changed and changed as if he had opened a dye shop. The worm's leg pierced his trousers, but it didn't hurt his little brother. As long as the worm's leg pierced 1 centimeter farther. No, just half a centimeter, his little brother would say goodbye to him completely. The worm's leg was pinned to his trousers, and he couldn't escape without lifting the worm's leg. The police were almost desperate. Hey Lao Lu, do you hear me? Answer me. A very unreal voice suddenly came from the walkie-talkie. The other leg of the giant worm swung over, wiping the side of the walkie-talkie and penetrating deeply into the sand. Run, take off your pants, Yehan roared violently, and the voice reached far away on the pier. The policeman came back to his senses, quickly unbuttoned his belt, and quickly took off his pants, almost taking off his underwear at the same time. Run away with shit. The giant insect's attention was attracted by the walkie-talkie, but he didn't chase after it. Wu Liang on the mountain was shocked, blushing and grabbing Ye Han's neck with a thick neck. What are you calling? What do you do when you invite bugs? Others also looked at Ye Han very unfriendly. Let go. Ye Han's face sank. Wu Liang was furious. You're right. Ye Han didn't say a word, and when he pressed and twisted his hands, Wu Liang lost his balance and fell to the ground in a blink of an eye. He didn't even know how he fell. UU Reading welcomes all book lovers to come and read. The latest, fastest, and most popular serial works are all available in UU Reading. Mobile users, please read.